And I would like you to walk through the possibilities you can see in this industry from whatever I have experienced. I'm Lavanya Koredia. I'm a practicing architect since the past 18 years now. I also co-own Studio Alia Projects Private Limited. Our mission in our practice at Studio Alia has been around sustainable design practices. We love designing buildings that are close to nature but are within the city as well. Today, Nandini and Saranya are co-hosts, and they have been for the past so many workshops. Hi, Nandini. Would you like to say hello?
Hi, ma'am. Hi, all. I'm Nandini, working at Studio Alia. I'm excited for this workshop as how you all are.
Nandini is an architect as well, and she is basically from Chennai working with us. Hi, Saranya. If you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Saranya. I'm also part of Studio Alia.
Thank you, Saranya. So are we ready, Saranya? So here we go. So I'll be sharing the presentation in basically two parts today. One is trying to understand why an alternative approach to construction and the construction techniques is necessary, and secondly, what all possibilities there are, and with a few takeaways at the very end. And once we are done, we will open the platform for question and answers, because I think that is the best part of doing an exercise of this sort. I'm ready, so whenever you're ready, Nandini, we can wrap up the session. So when we talk of sustainable construction techniques, one of the biggest issues that were discussed previously, and I would like to reapproach that right now, is that all these materials that get utilized for the construction on a property, which already has a small little, environmental world, a little biological world already existing, we undo that and we build on it with materials that cannot really go back into nature as they were. And food growing is perhaps the biggest and the most important aspect of land, because as human beings, we need food. And when else but now that we have realized that, right? So we need this food, but we ensure that we cannot have more of it because we consume the land and resources in a way that do not allow it to happen very easily. So I'd like to walk you through what all and how is it that my process of approaching this has been all this time. So of course, everybody wants to know how, like what is this alternative, or what are these construction techniques that we can adopt, right? And most of us say that we don't know about it because we have all these reasons, right? There are all these various reasons because of which we don't know how. Either that is your excuse or that is the truth, one or the other. One is, of course, education. Like one of you shared right now during the networking, that nobody taught us. We are supposed to do things to do with sustainability in college. Maybe we have an assignment, possibly we might have to do some detailing. We might even have possibly some material that we've read in different places, but there is nobody who teaches us why, what it is, and how to go about it. The second is this perception that we have of the kacha and the pakka house, and that is created by the community, right? So if you are economically, socially poor, you will live in a mud house with a thatched roof, and therefore that's a kacha house, and then there's a pakka house. And all that was also created by this storyline that came up with these three pigs and the wolf, and another story, if you remember, that if there was a straw house, then the wolf could blow it. If there was, burn it. There was some, something built with, other alternative materials. It could be destroyed, but a brick and mortar building stands. And that changed the way we started looking at construction as well. It influenced the young brains. And then, of course, the media and the corporations have played a huge, big, long role. Everything that is, you have all these Ambuja cement showing you one muscled man, and you have these steel rods that are advertised behind these buses and over large placards. And you believe that that's the only thing that is really strong, and anything else is weak. And in spite of there being years and years and centuries of construction techniques which were nothing to do with cement or steel, our belief is now, thanks to media, that there is nothing else that is stronger than a pillar or a what we people know as pillar and otherwise is called a column. So this is also a deliberate ignorance that has been created by the media for people to not approach anything else but these kind of materials that are great for the corporations themselves, right? It's pretty interesting, and it is how it is woven into the education as well, because you only study this. Of course, you see Bob the Builder, and everybody got really excited. Nandini is like, oh, I haven't seen Bob the Builder in a long time. But then when you see this Bob the Builder cartoon, you're not thinking of building a mud house. You are only thinking of technologically advanced construction techniques, which are very high in terms of resources that they utilize. I'd like to touch upon a little story of my little experience. And when we talk of, I wanted to touch upon this traditional construction practices, because nothing today was developed by itself. Everything is a relevance or has a relevance in the past and the history. So what we were doing now as well, if there is reason for us to rethink any process, it is also important to retouch upon the traditions that were existing or have been existing even now. I think it was 1997 that I was visiting Kutch with my parents. My father decided to take me on a road trip. And it was a very nice experience because I had never seen structures like this before. I did not understand the reason and the purpose behind them. They were all circular, which I thought was so cute. And each one was so beautifully decorated and they stood really well. It seemed to be just right in terms of temperature, in spite of Kutch being such a hot town. And then you saw this earthquake that happened in 2001 in Gujarat, and that kind of took over Gujarat completely. A lot of it was absolutely gone. But what was interesting is that all these structures that fell down or basically got destroyed were not these traditional, what we call as bungas. And a lot of you must already know bungas. If you've studied architecture, you've done some sort of a little knowledge reading, referencing from there. And what is very interesting to understand is that how these bungas have stood the test of time, but these brick and concrete buildings did not. Climate and the way environment worked on these new buildings hasn't really been that great. And these traditional buildings, which are made out of mud, were local, stood very well. The reason that I'm sharing this is that if you look at the way the bunga is built, it is designed such that the desert winds, which are humongously crazy, they also bring a lot of sand. I mean, they have a lot of sand and dust that they bring along. It's crazy. So when you have these, the circular building doesn't allow for anything to settle on any surface. And it allows the winds to basically pass around, which is supremely thoughtful. And the openings are really tiny so that they allow for the least amount of air inside, but there is enough for the light that they would need. It is deliberately kept a little dark so that it is cool. You utilize all the material which is available right around the building to be able to make the structure. And you would design and build this. There's no real major designing except for the artwork that you would do with the dung that comes out from the donkey shit, and with a little straw, and how pretty an aesthetic environment that you would create with these reflective mirrors, because you don't have otherwise light, natural light coming into the building. Then there is this. Anybody wants to guess what this is? It's okay if you can unmute and just tell me. What is this structure?
Great Wall of China.
Super. Thank you so much, a lot of you. There's of course Great Wall of China, which is some 21,000 plus kilometers in length, right? It's really immensely long. What do you think it is made up of? It is basically made with earth, stone, lime, wood, everything that was naturally available then. And this structure is still standing, and it's been eons now, it's been centuries now. Even the ones that were built with burnt brick, which was a later invention while making the Great Wall of China, that these little mud bricks that were lying around, there was a there was a forest fire, and all the bricks that they had made with just earth got burnt, and they realized that, oh, they have become lighter, and that's how brick was invented. And then they started moving them because then they realized it was much easier to take it up and down. But even if they had the brick walls, they filled them up with the yellow soil. They did not rely only on the bricks alone. And then I had taken a trip to Ladakh. And I was very amused how large windows and a lot of wood that they had. It was very interesting how the entire structure was built. Of course, it was a communal experience where the entire community came together to help that one house build. It was made with, the entire house is built with the soil that is available right there. The roofs are thatched so that it sustains it. It holds heat within so that it keeps warm, because it's exactly the opposite of the bunga. And you have all these glass windows and wooden windows to be able to attract as much warmth and heat as possible, very strategically placed so that you can bring in the maximum sun. It is very interesting to know that the poorest man will end up having more of windows because wood is easily available, but other materials are a little more difficult. And then you have all these, this is a structure of a traditional building structure that you would see in Goa, which is made out of laterite material. The laterite stone breathes. It is naturally available in Goa and that region of the country. And it allows for the airs to also aerate, which is extremely important in the high humid climate that it is. And then a wattle and daub kind of a structure that you would end up seeing in Maharashtra and parts of it. And look at how beautifully art gets incorporated into buildings. So this is what the traditional buildings were like. But of course, we don't like it because we live in the urban and we are very fancy, right? So these are the takeaways that I would say from the traditional construction techniques that are very important as a learning, because the learning can come from this. We don't have to copy anything. But as people who are intellectuals, as people who are educated, it is our responsibility to be able to at least emulate these understandings. So what they do is, these traditional buildings, if you see these few references I gave you, they use locally available material. They are climatically appropriate. It thinks about climate and how and where it is being placed and what is being done, because the thermal comfort was very important. There is no reliance on an alternative way of air conditioning, etc. Everything that it is built with can go back to the earth and instantly merge back into earth, such that it can either grow food or trees or everything that is necessary. It costs a lot less to maintain these buildings, right? And they include art. There's an aspect of love and feeling and art that also comes through. So one thing we know for sure, that as artists and architects and designers, that of course we are already artistic, so we already have the art bit of it. But it's the other references that somewhere we're missing that we might want to tie back in. And sustainability is this conversation and understanding how to sustain a practice in building shelters. Very simple. So I'm going to revisit some of the slides of the previous workshop, so that for those of you who joined today first time, and these are just a few of them. One is that, of course, the architecture and the construction industry, it together accounts for 36% of the global energy use and 39% of the energy-related carbon dioxide emissions that are annually are affecting the climate today. That's a lot. And in India alone, construction industry generates about 10 to 15 millions of waste annually. And that's a huge amount of waste. And a waste that cannot go back to the environment in a way that it can start generating or giving place to environment to be back in place. There's a government of, and of course, in spite of that, the government of India says that the construction industry contributes to 9% of the GDP. And it employs 44 million workers, because of which we're the second largest employers, as the industry that employs the second largest number of people in this country. And it also helps people move up the skill ladder, to improve in their income ladder, to be able to have and avail more and better. And we in a country where there's such a huge population, This is not an industry that can sit down and say, oh, we don't want to do this. This is where we become extremely responsible. It is our responsibility as the leaders in this community to be able to bring about this change in a way that people are also benefiting a whole lot. So of course, there's a lot of necessity for innovations in the construction industry, and sustainable solutions are seeked, and of course, that is why you're here today, to be able to learn about them. To us, this is what it means: sustainable design, irrespective of construction industry or not, whatever is it that you are doing, whatever is it that you're making, however is it that you live. This is a very simple thumb rule that you can go by. We've called it RALIS. I could have called it rails as well, but we've called it RALIS. One is to rethink how much we need and why do we really need it. Number two is real genuine climate sensitiveness in understanding the climate, how it works, and how it affects the structures and vice versa. Advised by the traditions and then bringing innovation into it, because there is already a traditional system that is already incorporated in the land or the place or the context that you're working in. All you want to do is just innovate there. Using local a technique, as local a material possible, the better. And involving skill set and craftspeople of the locals, again, ensuring that people are getting benefited in the process of doing whatever it is. So even if you're buying a handkerchief in the market or you're using a soap, these are the basic things that you can think of or do to be able to live a more sustainable lifestyle. And as a designer, these are also the rules that you will apply to wherever is it in the world that you're working. There's a very simple Chinese proverb that if we do not change the direction in which we are going, we are likely to end up precisely where we are headed. And if that is a destruction of the entire system, then that will be it. So change is really imminent. So what is it that I can do? A lot of you must think. And that's why we've invited you to be a part of this sustainable movement that we've created. Let's all join hands and more of us try and bring about the change. I know it is not going to be easy. It's going to take time because it's always a new shoe that takes a little longer than the old one. Old one is always more comfortable. But there is also something great about the new shoe. And therefore, let's welcome it. So how do we go about this? And now I come to the second part of this. This is what a typical foundation of a typical construction. I mean, in the 20 years of my practice itself, I have seen a huge transition. For most of you who are from the last decade, must have only seen these kind of foundations. And we're not saying this is wrong or this is right. All we're saying is there another approach that we can bring into this? Is it always a frame structure that is necessary? From the example I cited earlier about the situation in Kutch, thanks to the earthquake, is it really necessary to have a frame structure always? What kind of structures do we really need to create? How is it that they also affect as a design? When I came to South India, I discovered, because I'm otherwise from Gujarat, I discovered that you have these stone foundations, because stone is very easily locally available. So in South India, we do stone foundations and nothing stronger than that. It's beautiful. This is again a very simple example of what you can do to have an alternative to just concrete. Because steel and cement contribute to huge amount of emissions of the environment, they need to be re-looked at as materials for building. You have rammed earth foundations. Very simple. Those of you who have been to Auroville have already got introduced to this idea. Very simply done. Used to be a big practice once upon a time, has got redundant over time, can be brought back. The arch foundations, right? Super. This is a beautiful arch foundation example by Satyaprakash Varanasi's office, and this one from Chitra Vishwanath's office around environmental product limited. And this is a great way to reduce the amount of material that goes into making the foundation as well. Because stone is, of course, already a material, but then how much do you want to use of it? How do you minimize the material? It takes a little different design thinking when you use this kind of a technique, but there is still a possibility of it. flash bricks, doing load-bearing foundations with the kind of bricks that are available locally. In Pune and thereof, Deepak was asking this question. There are a lot of flash bricks available because Pune basically consumes thermal power. And because it consumes thermal power and flash being a big base that is generated out of it, and they have a lot of pharmaceutical industries as well, which have a lot of calcium carbonate based materials. You can combine this and make beautiful bricks, which is both waste, and utilize that for foundations. There's another, of course, a technique called soling, and you can do soling over a soft soil. I mean, there are thousands of techniques, and I do not know where to even begin or end. And therefore, I've only touched upon some basics that I have been introduced to. I have experienced and executed myself. Walls. You see this typical walls all over the place. There are concrete block walls with these concrete structures, and this is what a typical structure everywhere around you is. It is considered cost effective. I wonder how it is not costing, because the way they are manufactured, with the materials that these blocks are manufactured, how is it that it can not cost the environment a whole lot? It does. Alternatives that you can see of it. Of course, the first learning from traditions is that there is soil, there is earth. There's already available earth. There is so much of it and beautiful earth to that. And why not utilize that? You see Nandini holding this red earth in her hand. And it's such a beautiful thing to even hold in your hand. If you once fall in love with soil, you can never go back. And what you do with this beautiful soil that you excavate anyways, you can make these SMB blocks, these stabilized mud blocks with them. And this is the technique that the scientists of Karnataka in Mysore region came up with. And it has been so popular in the past couple of decades or more. It needs a specific kind of soil structure. It needs a very sandy soil. And it becomes easy to be able to do it in the Bangalore region and this region, because the soil here is naturally very sandy in nature. What is a beautiful part of doing alternative construction techniques is also this, that it automatically makes you very sensitive to what is in the environment. Automatically. We also call them mud blocks, stabilized mud blocks, CSEB blocks. There are several names given to them, but at the end of the day, they're made with soil. They're made with mud. And it's very easy to make them. You'll end up seeing, I'm sorry. And that's what the walls end up looking and being like. It's very easy to be able to incorporate this back into the system, because the workers, the laborers, for at least a couple of generations have already got unused to the old technology, the old techniques of building walls or building construction, right? So it's very easy to be able for them to just move from this to a mud block, from the regular bricks or the regular materials to the mud block, and it's an easier transition. So you will see that more of us are using these mud blocks because it is very easy for the laborers to handle them as well. And then there is rammed earth, of course, and you can do beautiful things with rammed earth. And how amazing that it ends up looking as well. And it can be sculptural by itself. There's a site where you just need two pieces of planks or shuttering, just like you need for concrete, and you can ram the earth into place. And this is, of course, a mix of earth, mix of soil, and there's a little. In Bangalore, we use a lot of dust. You can also use sand and a small proportion of cement or lime, as to be able to give it some sort of stability. It kind of acts like concrete, so it makes it very easy and very stable. In fact, they end up being pretty strong. It's very difficult to break or cut into these walls. Most of the electricians who have to cut into them for conduiting will complain. It is easier to cut into your regular bricks. The strength of these mud blocks is far higher than your regular red bricks that you manufacture, red table mold bricks that we talk about. And then there's Cob Walls. Cob Wall is one of the most ancient of techniques in most of the region of the Central Asia, Central India. You will see that this is a very clay soil, allows you to work and mold the soil a lot. You add a little gravel, you add a little straw to it, and that makes it very malleable. Give it a little mold if you wish to, or just use your hands to be able to give it a shape. And you can create very beautiful sculptural structures out of it. And traditionally, there have been 2-3 story buildings also created with cob, so you don't have to really limit yourself. This is, in this case, this is a cob flooring. And then there is Adobe Bricks. Adobe Bricks, again, these are not necessarily your mud blocks. So the mud blocks are compressed in nature. They're compressed to be able to give them a certain kind of density that makes them very strong in nature. But these Adobe Bricks was a traditional method of doing it. I'm sorry if the rain is disturbing. It is pouring right now. The Adobe Bricks bring in a little straw, again a little gravel, just like what cob is. It works like how cob works, but you give them into a small little parts, because it's very easy for you to work with them. The technique, again, very highly used in the central part of our country, in Africa as well. Very easy. In the east region of the country, you will see this technique of the wattle and daub, as we call it. There's a lot of bamboo that's very easily available. Because it is raining so much, the walls need to breathe a lot. It needs to keep the walls aerated so that it reduces the amount of humidity, makes it easier to breathe. And the wattle and daub is a superb technique to be able to get that working for you. It's a very innovative styles that a lot of architects have been able to incorporate as well. So again, if you're working in the east of the country, where the materials are easily available, where there is less termite infestation, it is very easy to use these techniques. And then, like I mentioned earlier, there is fly ash bricks. So you have these fly ash bricks, and they're manufactured in the parts of the country where you have thermal power stations. So if you have thermal power stations and you have a lot of fly ash, it makes common sense to make a brick out of it, because otherwise that carbon left in the environment is very difficult. It is very difficult on the respiratory systems of human beings. So what you can do, build buildings with it, because that is our way of paying back our debt to the environment. They're absorbing that material. In a technique called rat trap bond, which also is famously known as RTB, you use a lot less material. You use only 2/3 of the material. You save a lot more material, allow for the walls to also be insulated in the process, and the buildings can look very nice. You don't necessarily have to do something else on it. In case you're even having to use your regular table mold brick, the reason that we are not really very encouraging of using the table mold brick is only for one reason. Especially where we are in this Karnataka region, farm owners sell their farmland because they are highly poisoned with chemicals and pesticides that are, again, corporation fed. And the soil is not generating anymore. And these non-generative lands are sold away to brick making factories or rented out to them so that they can make bricks with the soil. So the top soil, which is otherwise has it has good amount of what we call as organic matter, which allows for the food to grow, which is only the first 9 to 10 or 12 inches of the soil. That is already taken away, and then it's made the bricks. The bricks are made with them. The bricks are burnt, and all that organic matter is otherwise burnt. And the bricks are not of great quality because the soil here is not very clean in nature. So why even use it? But if you do have to use it, then again, rat trap bond is a great technique because again it helps in minimizing the material. Depends again on where, because if your houses are in absolute proximity, you don't want to use that, because just as air is a great insulator of heat, it is a great conductor of noise as well. So you want to be sensitive about that. And that's what our rat trap bond house that we have, Maitri Shankar would relate to it. It is her neighbor, and can end up looking like. And then there is bottle walls. How many of them? So there's so much waste out there, and especially bottles, because we're partying so much. There are all these bottles, and you can create all these bottle walls and create a lot of drama and fun with them. And it is so exciting to see light coming through in such a magical way. There are regions in Maharashtra that plastic water bottles are being stuffed with earth or any waste material and are also being built with. And it's beautifully being done. And then the third aspect is, of course, the roof. And we talk about what happens with the roof. This is what a typical roof will look like, and that is the amount of steel that will end up going into it. At every 6 inches and every 7 inches, there is a bar of steel plus another layer of steel, and that much, and then concrete, just 5 to 6 inches of concrete that goes in. And then the question is, do we really need all of this? Is this how it is meant to be? Is there another way? And we'd like to show you what are the different kind of roofs that you can really play with. There's, of course, the filler slab. The filler slab allows you to halve the amount of steel, also additionally bring in insulation because the material is hollow. And the huldi, which is a tile that is manufactured in this part of the country, in Kerala and in Karnataka, is a beautiful invention that allows you to do a filler slab very conveniently. In other parts of the countries, I've had the experience of it not being an available material, and therefore you can always have another alternative. And I'd like to show you what. Like in the buildings we did in Pune, we ended up going literally to our neighbors and seeing that they had all these Mangalore tiles that were wasted and they did not want to use anymore because they had a sloped roof, but these Mangalore tiles were not of the size that was the new size available, and the old ones are not the same. So the old ones were not usable anymore. So sandwiching them and using them, which was a technique that was developed by Lolly Baker years ago, a beautiful system to be able to minimize the amount of concrete and steel, is how you can also do a filler slab. You can bring in design and variations in it. And that's how it could look like from the bottom. There is something new, there's something different. The finished version ends up looking and feeling like that. You can, of course, paint it to a color you wish, but you can also leave it naturally the way it is. Bringing terracotta material into it. There are so many architects who are doing some fabulous works right now, trying to play with these materials and creating some magic with it. You can bring in waste tiles, incorporate all of that to be able to again help minimize the amount of steel and the concrete that can go into a slab. And talking of minimizing, the arch and the flat panel system, which is again very highly professed at the Auroville as well, are these panels that you can make with these waterproofing tiles that you would otherwise use for the roof. And these tiles can be made into these panels that can either use as a slope proof in terms of a panel that you can place next to each other, just 1.5 inches thick. They're made like so. If it is made into a semi-arch, then they can be made at site like that, and then just placed on top of these ribbed beams that you would use. Either you can use a concrete, a precast beam, or you can use a steel beam like that. And it has a little different aesthetic. So there was this this is arch panel, but we had the jacka roofing in the older days. The arch panel is an innovation from the jacka roofing. Of course, there are domes and bolts that you can do, and these mud blocks make it very easy. Mud blocks, the bricks, there are several materials that you can play with, of course, but you can play with shapes. And like you remember, you learned in your physics classes that everything circular is a very stable form. This is a very stable form. It does not again require any steel reinforcement or concrete and can very conveniently be utilized to be able to make these forms by using a very simple, for the vault you just need one little scaffolding, and for the dome it is just just laying the bricks in circular pattern in layers by layers. And that's it. They allow you to have a lot more volume, therefore allowing for cooling as well, and it increases the amount of coolness and thermal comfort within the space also. And there's of course ferro cement that I mentioned before, which can be used for staircases, for walls, in several different innovative ways. This house in Pune again, that we had a mango tree that we did not want to cut. We wanted a wall that kind of did the shape of the mango tree, not interrupting the mango tree's growth. And that's how the wall turned out to be with ferrocement. And you can bring in innovation and design and style into that. Waste is the next aspect. In the traditional homes that we saw that there was this art was incorporated into the homes, and that was done with all the materials that were locally available. In Kutch, there are all these colored rocks that are available in the vicinities of the Kutch region, and they use those colored powders to be able to do little drawings on the walls of their houses, and of course the dung of the mules and the donkeys that they raise, also to be able to create artwork. In the city, we have the challenge of the urban waste, and there is huge immense of it. How is it that that can also become a part of our design, of the art? We can use waste pieces of stone as a part. I mean, we've ended up using them in toilets, using them to be able to create an artwork which becomes the backsplash for my rainwater chains. They can become pavers, produced by this eco-social, Swachh eco-social NGO. And yeah, keyboards sandwiched with thermocol. Thermocol, again, a waste when goes back into the environment is very difficult. It doesn't have another purpose to serve. It doesn't decompose, in fact, at all. And it is a great insulation material. So collecting that and adding that, sandwiching that with a keyboard that also doesn't have another purpose to serve is a great way to be able to ensure that we are trying to minimize things. In this school's case, we had one kabadiwala right next doors who had all this stuff and we wanted to use it up. And then the last aspect is, of course, the finishes, because a lot of us are very aesthetic people. In fact, all of us are. And we want things to be beautiful. And there is nothing wrong with that, because nature made everything to be beautiful. And as designers and creators, it is a responsibility to create beautiful things. And then finish has become a concern because a lot of us are very fascinated by everything that is imported and coming from another world. But the reality is that our country itself has some beautiful finishes available. And from these Atunguri handmade tiles to hand-done oxide floors of various colors, to mud plasters, and so many different techniques of mud plasters, to very beautiful Indian stones. Every single stone image is an Indian stone available in our country, and you cannot have to necessarily source it outside of our country. You don't have to import anything. Jaisalmer to Kota, a stone. This Jaisalmer stone looks like wood. It can very easily mimic wood. Wood is such a wrong material to use as a flooring material. It is so not appropriate for the climate of this country. You look at, again, this stone here, the green marble, or the Udaipur green as we call it. It is not really a marble, it's a dolomite stone, but it's so inexpensive and so easily available and so easy to use and brings it the little Indian feel and vibe without really compromising with the aesthetic of a space, without it looking very traditional and looking like a kacha house, but still made out of mud. So Einstein says that you cannot solve a problem with the same mindset that created it. And therefore, there will have to be a little shift in the mindset of how and what we need and why do we need or want what we do and want. Because it will begin from there that we will start bringing in the change into how we want to approach architecture. Thank you. Some takeaways. Can we please put Darshan on mute? Yes, thank you. Saranya, Darshan. Oh, can we please put Darshan on mute? Thank you. So some takeaways from this. One is that check the local techniques. So if you say that, hey, I am a builder, I'm an architect, or I'm a designer, how do I go about ensuring which technique and which material I use? Because there are too many options here. That is true. The options are immense, and unlike what we've learned to believe that there is only one way of doing a building, it is not true. There are so many ways that you can look at structures, and more than what I've shared today. So some of the takeaways would be that you would look at the local techniques of construction. So look at wherever is it that you're designing a building, first reflect upon what the traditional systems were and how they would, or how they can be applicable back into the today's time and date by just innovating a little. In case that is not available directly in that region, you want to also look at these aspects of where the material comes from and how distant it comes from, right? So point number 3 is that you look at the carbon footprint of the material and how far does it have to travel to come to our site. The closest proximity it is from, the better it is for the environment as well as the project. And then, of course, the climate factor plays. So like I quoted you the example of what happens in Kutch and what happens in Ladakh, and how the approach to design of a traditional building is played by the climate and how climate decides what is to be done and not. You also need to look at it. Like if you were building a house in Mangalore or somewhere in the coastal region, or if I was working in a place like Mumbai, then I would look at using laterite because the laterite stone breathes and it allows the walls to ventilate. And that is extremely important when you're looking at hot and humid climate and how is it that you can bring thermal comfort with it. So climate is going to start teaching you and guiding, and it's a very quick learning you will get from the traditions that are already ongoing or have already been used before. 4th, figure out your priorities as a builder or as a designer owner, because that will have to be the case. Okay, I want to please my client is a possible priority. There's nothing wrong with that. You could also decide your priorities. I want to look at only the climate. I want to only look at the finishes. I want to only look at this, because it's all right to take one step at a time. You don't have to feel very guilty if you're not doing everything perfectly. You can just take one little step at a time and choose that one little change you will bring into your next project, and then slowly, gradually make it larger and larger and larger as it goes. And then the 5th thing is you look at the skill set that is available to you, right? It is going to play a big role. I want to use a Cob technique, but I don't have the skill set of the laborers willing to do it. It is not going to happen. You have to also have the bandwidth and the monetary fund to be able to educate and train these laborers, if at all. So looking at the skill set and the willingness of what is available right around you is also going to play a very big role. And besides that, of course, you want to look at RALIS. You want to rethink everything. You want to look at everything from a local aspect, look at it from a sensitive perspective of the climate, of the local, and also get informed from what the traditions already have been. I'd like to end this by saying this, that I cannot do all the good that the earth needs, but the world needs all the good that I can do. So if you are willing to do that little good, that can be a beginning in this movement towards sustainability. I'll just inform you this last aspect, that the next, for all of you who want to know what's up next, stay tuned for our upcoming workshops, because we're going to be working on more of these. And our website and our Instagram handle is _project. So if you follow us, then we keep getting updates on what we are doing next. Having only one option is not an option. There are so many options, and you can choose from a whole variety of them. Thank you, everybody. Taranya, you could unmute everyone if there are questions. I would really like to apologize for the rain and the sound in the background. I'm sorry I couldn't do much about it.
Okay. Ma'am, Asita has a few questions. Asita, would you like to ask yourself, or should I read on your behalf? Okay. I think I'm going to say. Can these roofing techniques be used for slabs in multi-storied buildings? And can they handle the weight?
Yes. How many multi-stories is the question? So number one is that we are assuming that we don't want to do a lot of multi-story in the first place, because that's the easiest way to impair the environment. We discussed it last time as well, that the biggest way that you can do everything wrong is to do everything centralized. Bring all this complication by making large structures with a lot of people living in the same place and trying to then manage the issues. So the biggest problem is to centralize everything and then try to solve the problem. If you first create it, there's no point in solving it. So begin with the understanding of how is it that it will be a problem by the way you will design it in the first place. If there is a way that you can decentralize it in the first place, all of these materials can be utilized. It will need another level of approach.
The other question is, other than fly ash bricks, can the other wall materials be used for high-rise buildings?
Again, so we're again asking high-rise. Sarani, you might not want to take up the question which are already asked. High-rise itself is a concern to sustainability. If the example that I suited earlier, if you saw what happened in Kutch, the minute there was an earthquake, it was not the traditional buildings that fell down. It was the buildings that were high-rise that fell down. The reason is not just their height. It is also that higher you go, the lower the foundation goes. The lower the foundation goes, the closer it is to the plates. And the movement is affected at the lower levels first and then comes to the surface. In fact, I remember when there was the earthquake, I was in the bed on the second floor, and I was wondering who was shaking my bed, and I was getting angry with my dog as to, Popeye, why are you shaking the bed? And I ran down when I realized that it was an earthquake. And when I ran downstairs and I saw my grandmother gardening, I was like, Ma, there was an earthquake. She had no idea. Because on the top surface, the earthquake really doesn't hurt you. It doesn't do anything because it moves along with the movement. It is only when you go lower down that it starts shaking up everything. So you're creating this problem of a high-rise structure, and then you're deciding to bring it, solve the problem, is a contradictory way of being able to do anything to do with construction or design, in my opinion. I'll read out some of the questions. Ginny says that finish is a big challenge with skilled labor. That is true, Ginny. Because there isn't enough, it would be nice if you could also unmute yourself and ask the question, because there'll be a little more activity and it sounds less like a monologue. Skill is indeed a concern, is what I'm saying, that there is a need to develop this skill set. And that can only begin with initiators like ourselves. We begin with whatever is possible and then slowly grow from there. I have had that initial issue, but over time we've seen that with consistent doing and working on, the skill set is very easily developed. Even they see the faith in it. Do CACV blocks and other exposed means like rammed earth construction withstand weathering and extreme climates? What is the lifespan of these materials? So I already suited the example that the Great Wall of China is basically built with earth and rammed earth, by the way. It was only later that they discovered bricks, much later. So with weathering and the construction withstanding is really not an issue with any material if it is designed well. If a bunga in Kutch can last forever and ever for more than 100 years, there is something wrong with the way the material is being looked at and designed in the urban context, is where the faith is lost. Like my mentor has always said, that good shoes and a good hat is extremely important for a building to sustain itself, irrespective of what material it is made of. Aishwarya, would you like to ask the question? I'd like to hear somebody but myself. Now, how is the comparative lifespan of buildings made with modern versus traditional material techniques? The modern buildings fall down faster than the traditional buildings, is what I have observed. If you see in the newspaper, every other day your so-called modern building is falling off. Something is destroyed. But the traditional buildings last for the longest of time. A little maintenance over a period of about 50 years is all it requires. So they do last.
Hi Lavanya, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jenny. Yes.
Okay, great. So apologies, I couldn't introduce myself earlier.
Thank you, no problem.
for everybody, my name is Guinness Anders. I'm basically a marketing and a design guy who has now turned to sustainability. I'm developing a small, a village kind of a thing, say about 100 acres of land, 50 owners, which is like absolutely sustainable. The guidelines are sustainable, architecture is sustainable, food forests, regular forest is what we are working on right now. So why I'm here is I wanted to see on more methodologies of construction in the sustainable space, and I think most of the today's available technologies have been discussed today. So one area of challenge which I still face is training your team to create these kind of structures. Training as in it's really difficult to find places where they can get actually trained with this kind of work. And
so that is what we are actually working on, Jimmy, that we are working on being able to create this platform is going to grow into a training platform of the same sort, because we'd like more people to be able to build and more skilled laborers to get introduced to the idea. So we're happy to, because otherwise, except for Auroville, there is no one place that locally, that especially in Bangalore, that anybody can reach out to. So we intend to be able to create that platform where we can develop the skill set for laborers, or for people like yourselves who want to be able to influence or train the laborers afterwards.
great, I think that's one big challenge the industry is facing, and people like us who really want to go sustainable, develop sustainable layouts and living spaces. This is where probably it's becoming a bottleneck. But if you guys are working in this, that would be really great to work
Certainly,
along with.
we're hoping.
Yeah.
We're hoping. Fingers crossed.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Jimmy. Would anybody else like to? Because I would rather not read and have you ask the questions. Ron, who is _ Ron? No. Asita, you had your hand up. Do you want to ask?
Yes, I actually had a question regarding what I've asked before. Like in an ideal world, it would be nice to just have non-high-rise buildings, but when it comes to an urban context, it is mostly compulsory. Like it has become a compulsion that due to less area that is already existing, you have to have a high-rise or at least a mid-rise, like G+5 structure.
Okay.
So how can sustainability in materials be included in such a building?
So first, let's accept this fact that that kind of living lifestyle isn't sustainable in the first place. All right. Okay. It begins with some level of acceptance. The urban context, though it is as tempting and as everything is so available and it is the place that the people want to live in, it is really not a sustainable lifestyle, because you see what has happened recently with all this, with the pandemic hitting, people started migrating back. It is natural. Right. It did not work for several reasons, and everything spread very fast in the cities as well. And that is why cities are also going to become they're already very vulnerable. So number one is that. Number two is that putting everybody into these high-rise multi-story buildings is otherwise, of course, no other option if you were saying that. Then if that is not an option, then again, let's accept it that is an option you're choosing because there is nothing else. And this is also not going to be a sustainable option for a long period of time. So once you have accepted that, then you look at what is it that you can do best. And that's it. What is it that you can do best in terms of what are the materials that will help me reduce the amount of material? What are the ways that I can reduce the weight or the load of the building itself so that it stands lighter on the ground or the earth or the substrata of the earth? That's the kind of conversation that you want to bring into it. And that is a conversation you want to bring in with a structural engineer as well. And looking at alternative roofing in terms of these filler slabs, for example, if you bring in filler slabs, which are lesser in their self-load, then they load lesser on the columns, then they load automatically lesser on the foundation. That's what you will end up looking at. and then filling in with materials again that are sweeter or nicer or easier on the earth. Like in Pune, I see there's a huge practice of using fly ash bricks everywhere, and they call it an eco-friendly construction. Right, eco-friendly, sustainable necessarily, but okay. So you can use these fly ash bricks. There are all these filler slabs being used with using waste thermocol and these fly ash bricks very nicely, and still finishing them just like any other modern apartment building can be.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
There are lots of questions here. If there is any other question that anyone would like to ask. No? Saranya, do you want to?
Yeah, I would like to read out a question. I see a good amount of light in all the projects. Is there any specific wall to window ratio or floor to window? How do we decide on the number of openings?
Wow. So number of openings and size and the percentage will be based on what your local immediate climate is. In our case, of course, because Bangalore, we're in a very much more comfortable place. We can afford to have a lot of larger openings because it's not that hot in this city. We have a very, very mild climate in compared to the other parts of the country. So every region will require a different approach to light per wall ratio, as you call it. But you want to be able to have, in Bangalore, we want lower windows, we want higher windows because we have more than 100 cloudy days. So it becomes extremely glum. Bangalore has also been one of the topmost cities that has a topmost number of suicides in this country because of, again, lack of relationship with sunlight besides many other reasons. So we see that light becomes very important, and we don't really use a ratio per se, but we look at it from the perspective of how close or how far they are from the next door building, where is that the opening is facing and positioning. We also look at it as from the perspective of where the air movement will be from, at what part of the day with space will be used. Thank you. But all right. Any other question?
Yeah, Deepak, would you like to ask your question yourself?
Yeah. In Pune, madam, people are constructing RCC staircases. Okay, that helps to shift material during construction to first floor. So if we don't go for RCC staircase, so how we shift material to first floor during construction?
We never say you should not do an RCC staircase.
No. If I wanted to ask, I saw in your some of the projects, you have not constructed RCC staircase. You have constructed a fabrication and wooden step staircase.
So in our case, that is not necessarily an answer to only sustainability. That is also something that our clients have insisted and asked us for, and it has become a trend within our projects. We see that the RCC staircase also blocks a lot of light and ventilation, and we did not want to do that. But if you talk of ferro cement, you can do a ferro cement staircase, not finish it, and you can still utilize, you can go up and down it. The finishing is only a top layering. Otherwise, it's a very stable structure. You can very easily utilize them.
Okay.
And in Pune, only in Pune itself, there are some beautiful buildings that are being done with ferro cement staircases internally.
Yeah, but in your one of the project, there was a staircase which was not in ferro cement also.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So you can use ferro cement for a larger structure, but if to be able to take things up and down, we don't always have ferro cement staircases. We also end up doing for a two-story house, we end up doing these lightweight staircases so that they can be taken away, they can be reutilized, that material can be reutilized. All the steel can be sold after the building has lived its life. So otherwise, we climb up ladders like everybody else does. Yeah.
Akshay wants to know, he has a site in Marathwada region of Maharashtra and it has a black cotton soil. I'm a bit confused which technique to use. Mud blocks can be made with black cotton soil?
Very nice question, Akshay. So the answer is yes. Mud blocks or these CACB blocks can be made with any kind of soil, but there is a little hitch or the problem to it. The issue with this, with the CACB blocks and its composition is that it expects it to have more than 70% of sand or sandy nature. So the sand content in the soil needs to be at least 70% for it to be able to turn into very good, stabilized mud blocks. Now, the issue here is that if your black cotton soil ends up having almost no sand, has a little, but it's as good as nothing, and it expands and contracts with lack of water very easily. So you add water, it expands. You take it off, it contracts. That's why you have all these, in the drought seasons, you have these lines that show on these photographs of drought, right? Now, this contraction, expansion and contraction means that the soil has high amount of clay. And the clay doesn't make the stabilized mud block a great material to use for making mud blocks. You will end up having to add a lot of sand to that black cotton soil for it to become a material which can become into a mud block. Now, it doesn't make fiscal sense to be able to do something of the sort. And that's exactly why this example that I suited in Pune was a black cotton soil. And we decided to not use soil because that was not the right way to go about it. The second issue there is that is also a consideration to be taken is that a black cotton soil is superb for growing food. And it might as well be left to be able to grow food and grow forests in than to be able to make buildings in. It's the best source, in fact. So ideally, I would not use it. You start then looking at waste. And that's why fly ash bricks is what was my answer to the problem. And for the foundation, you can do a load bearing foundation with these fly ash bricks themselves. You don't necessarily have to go the earth way. Use waste. There's a huge amount of waste that Pune also creates, from Wattle Walls to these earth bags to several other experimentations that have happened, and you can utilize all of that.
Ashwarya wants to know if there was a need to provide housing for poor and slums, what is the best option for this type of construction sustainability?
Wow, that's a long conversation. That's a really long conversation. I would say first, number one is that you want to look at them from the perspective of buildings that can be undone. So they have to be, of course, some of the best kind of buildings that can be moved from one point to another very easily, because your slums or your migrant community, especially this socio-economic strata, doesn't always remain where they are. They move a whole lot as well. And you see how much movement has right now occurred in this time. So you cannot necessarily have a fixated example. You can also have a fixated example, but there has to be a lot of detailing that has to go into it. It's a long discussion. Material is the last issue or the last answer to the problem, actually. I'm mentioning Pune a whole lot, but there's some amazing work happening in Pune regarding slum housing also.
Sandeep wants to ask, will off-site constructions make more sense vis-a-vis on-site constructions in terms of sustainability?
Yes, they do make sense. It does make sense. That is exactly what I was mentioning right now when I was giving the example of the slum development that was asked to me. That yes, it does make a lot of sense to have a lot of offsite work as well, but it is very important to understand what for and what kind of a building. So if you're looking at commercial viability and looking at commercial buildings, they should be something that are offsite, brought onto site, fixed into place, again moved wherever they need to be. But if you're looking at in terms of a residential or shelter-based, that needs a whole different conversation. So you want to, people like permanency in that sense. It's going to take a long time to change that thinking. Can sustainability be achieved by only using special techniques over and above raw materials? Sustainability in the first place cannot be achieved in the way we are doing construction anyways. Construction itself is a negation to a sustainable lifestyle, especially the way we do it. Each person, especially in the city I live in, at least owns 2 or 3 residences, if not more, in one lifetime right now, right? At least 2 residences, if not more. The need is no more a shelter. If we have come into a whole socio-economic stage where we can afford a lot more than we really need. So we're not even answering that aspect of sustenance. We've gone far beyond that. So if we are going to do too much of anything, we might as well do it in the most innocent way, where we're stepping as lightly on the earth as possible, is my thought.
Okay. What is the best way to reduce the temperature inside the structure? Yeah. So sorry for the disturbance.
How much load can a stone foundation take? Wow, some nice birds in the background. How much load can a stone foundation take? Stone foundation can take a lot of load depending on how deep you make it. So you want to design it for the specific context. That's all. Again, you want to ask the question yourself with me. So yes, Branda, please talk to me. Branda? Ron, would you want to ask me a question? You had a question and I don't think we've read it. All right. Sarana, would that be all? Do you want to ask anything else?
There's one last question, ma'am. Manjunath Babu wants to know, how was the ferro cement stairs made?
Oh, that's a very long answer again. I would have to get into physical technique, but it is essentially your typical 2x2 mesh with chicken mesh that are weaved into each other. And then they're folded into the step that you want. I mean, that is speaking in a very, very simplified manner. It takes a little artwork, but it utilizes very little material if done properly. Thank you for asking that question. Sandeep?
Yes,
hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, Sandeep. Would you like to ask me something?
You have already answered 2 questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Another question is there, ma'am.
Yes.
What is the best way to reduce the temperature inside the structure using the sustainable building technique? How much degree temperature is reduced? What is that?
So you can achieve anything from 2-3 degrees to a 10-12 degree difference in temperature if you use the technology properly, not just of the material, but also with the way you approach design. We've been able to measure more than 10 degree difference in temperature.
That's it.
Okay. Would that be all, everybody?
Ma'am, can I ask one question?
Yes, please, Akshay.
Ma'am, actually, my client is insisting for mud construction.
मुझे घर देखना है.
Yes.
So, what to do? I have not been to the site because of this lockdown, but soon we are planning to visit. But as per the description from client, they have a hilly side, and they will find a lot of black cotton soil and stones. So what should I do? They are mainly focusing on mud construction only.
So if it is already a hilly site, then the chances of it only being black cotton may be fewer. You might find you'll find a lot of muram soil as well. So you want to first do some sampling and some checking with the soil that you get. And you stay in touch with me and I will guide you. So you want to do a few samples, leave them to set, also do a little bottle checks. We do a lot of bottle checks with the soil as well to see the kind of sand content in it. And then you do a little mix checks and then see how those perform. And then you can take the decision. But let the client understand if they are educated, because now obviously that sounds like a client who already understands and has appreciation for alternative,
Yeah, she's an architect too, but she's not practicing.
Okay. So then obviously she understands, and if she understands it, then guide her. Make her understand that here this will be most relevant and you might want to use this specific technique for this reason. And then kind of slowly maneuver, like we say, very gently maneuver your clients into a direction which is most appropriate for them. Right? In case there is no other way she wants to do, then black cotton soil has also been utilized for doing mud blocks. Ek to uska color ekdam kala aayega, so they have to be okay with that. Dusra, the second thing is that there will be a lot of sand, and especially in Pune, sand doesn't come from Pune. Pune doesn't have a river right there. So
the site is in Marathwada, near to Parbhani.
So then you have a river there. Do you get good river sand?
No, it's a drought area again.
So if you don't get river sand locally, then that itself is a first issue. So then it will be very expensive, and all of this is going to become a very expensive venture. So the minute everything is becoming very expensive, you also want to revisit the idea, because something you're doing wrong there. If you're doing everything sustainably right, it will automatically be more economical than the other process.
Okay, sure. I'll check with the sand and I'll be in touch with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I have one query.
Yes, Mr. Sandeep.
See, I feel bamboo is one product which can, which is excellent product which can be used.
What is bamboo? Huh. I'd like to answer. I was expecting a bamboo question. Yeah. So before you, okay, I'm so enthusiastic. I cannot wait. Tell me. Yes.
Because my close relative, my wife's maternal uncle, they have a factory in Meghalaya. As the northeastern India is full of bamboos, and they have the wide range of products. They make bamboo ply. They make even the door frames with bamboo. They stick the bamboo sticks together, and then they make a lot of permutation combination. They use top layer of the particle board made with rice husk. And between a bamboo ply in between.
Beautiful.
But I feel that particular product, which is perhaps the best product for environmental issues and the sustainability, is not so extensively used. Even the government of India has put in a lot of thrust in promoting the bamboo-based industries. So, what is your take on that? Why the architects in modern are not using that? Maybe the local availability or any other reason?
Architects are supremely fascinated by bamboo. I'll tell you, every architect wants to use bamboo. Every designer wants to use bamboo. So there is a lot of fascination with the kind of different things you can do with bamboo, especially when it comes to turning and giving it shapes and forms, and all the fascinating buildings that you see all over the world being used with that. My personal take is this. So of course it's fantastic that your family is doing what they're doing, and we would love to be able to look at all those materials. Besides that, everything that has a lot of adhesion and a lot of changing. So bamboo itself by itself cannot be used because it's got starch and cellulose as material in it, and it is a starch for which the termites infest it, where there's a lot of water. So you end up having to treat the bamboo with extensive amount of water, or with other chemicals which are not necessarily a great addition to the environment back. Right? It is very easy to say that, oh, it's bamboo, it's natural, but then what do you do to this natural material where most of it is taken? I'll give you a very simple desi example. Okay, all of us like to, I love Karela sabzi. Okay, I love bitter gourd, but I chop the bitter gourd, I add a lot of salt to it, I squeeze the juice out of it completely, and then I fry it in oil and I eat it. What is the point in eating that Karela? You get what I mean already, Mr. Sandeep. That's exactly what is happening to bamboo as well. You over-treat it, you do so much to that bamboo that it no more remains what it really was before. All its quality is lost in what it was supposed to be. And then they say, oh, this is very natural, but it is not. It is not as great for you or for the environment. In my opinion, we should go for what is genuinely, literally, locally there. So if I was living right next to Nagarhole forest, maybe I would use a lot of bamboo from the Nagarhole forest. But if it is coming all the way from Northeast or is coming from China, it needs to be rethought about. It needs to be revisited as a thought process. That is what. Thank you. Would you, Naveen, would you like to ask your question, please? Naveen? Naveen, shall I unmute you? Okay. Naveen is saying they would love to know about the flat brick roofs in detail. Please torch us some light on that topic. So what do you mean by the flat brick roof is it's a flat panel roof, and these bricks are basically waterproof tiles which are slightly hollow. They split into two tiles. They're also called split tiles. They're used for the purpose of waterproofing and thermal proofing the roof. So these are the tiles that we end up using for creating these flat panels. But I'd have to have a separate detailed session to explain that to you, because just verbally it's a lot to explain. But the panels turn out to be only 1.5 inches in the thickness, and they become like precast panels, and you can use them just like any other precast material that you would use.
Ma'am, there are 2 more questions. How sustainable is wood? Because wouldn't we be damaging the forest if we
I read that.
wood in construction?
So I read that, and just like Mr. Sandeep spoke, and I think Mr. Sandeep would be the right person to speak about it. What kind of wood, where it comes from, is extremely important. There is something called plantation wood, and there is something called, there's something called forest wood. And if you start harvesting forest wood, you are hurting the forest biome that is already existing. So you want to reconsider that. But if you're looking at it from the perspective of needing wood, then wood is a great material because it can be recycled and utilized several times in the way it is, right? If I build a window, or I do windows or a door with a solid piece of wood, several generations can utilize that wood as it is, and that is a big advantage of wood. So these plantation woods, which have been developed by the forest departments, are great for utilization if you are going the wood way. I would rather go that way than go with UPVC windows. I'm so sorry, but that is, I have a huge amount of, I'm very opinionated about those kind of things. So I would rather use wood and plantation wood than to go into these kind of materials. And if there was a choice between UPVC windows and the bamboo windows, if there are, Mr. Sandeep is talking about, I would rather use bamboo. That way. So there's always a flip, and you always want to choose between the two. What can I do this and what can I do for that?
You have to trade off.
Yes, there's always a trade-off. What is the lesser of the evil? Because building a building itself is an evil. Now, what is the lesser of the evil that I will want to undertake? Is there somebody else who'd like to ask a question? Should we close this?
Hello.
Yes, hello, Brinda.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I had a doubt or a sort of how to start basically. So suppose if you are an architect student who has just graduated, or you are into the field. So if you want to work on some project, or if under anyone or as an individual, other prior step of working, if you want to make someone understand, as if there is a client or even your surrounding neighbors who would want to build something, but you would want to insist them as how important is sustainability, or they would better choose some mud block rather than a cement. So how to start in that conversation, or make some change? So because when even if I want to design them for something, first they won't accept, because maybe I'm still an amateur, or I'm still in the process of training or trying to figure out as how things work. They would ask an experienced person. And second, they would more be looking into cost cutting and more of estimate and see whether a builder can do it in a much more amount, or
Brinda,
how much.
I can quickly answer that question. Ask them the question: would you like a solution for your house that will bring the cost of the maintenance down to at least 10%? If you have a well ventilated house, which is thermally appropriate, if you have a building that is already that is much easier to maintain, you have less number of walls to paint every year, you have less of the headache in terms of having to polish floors and keep another kind of a special mopping device and things like that, it will automatically be far easier to maintain a building like that, in comparison to somebody else who has used some fancy Italian marble, who has gone into plastering and has painted all their walls, and then has soiled looking surfaces, and who doesn't have very well ventilated homes, and therefore they end up having to use air conditioning all throughout the year. So their electricity bills will be higher. Of course, we're not even talking about water and alternative energy and all of that. If you end up looking at treating wastewater, looking at harvesting water, looking at managing your waste, that all will add up to the amount of money you will save over the years. So the question should be this: if the answer is no, I'm not interested, don't force anybody into it. Is my way of doing it, right? If they're open to it, have the conversation with them. If they're not, it is okay. It is, everybody takes their own time to get there, and everybody should be given the opportunity to. Right? And if you as a designer want to do something, go gently, go small, go as little as you want to, go as gently as you want to. It is okay. As long as your intention is good, it makes a big difference.
Thank you, ma'am.
We can add one more aspect to this, if I may say so.
Yes, Mr. Deep.
See, now, we may ask the client whether they want to go with more sustainable or energy efficient raw materials and all. Like in a day, a normal human being, we breathe almost 90,000 times in a day. And we are all surrounded with products like whether wood or carpet or anything. All these products are made with, products which has the VOC content, the volatile organic compound, and that keep on emitting those harmful, they get mixed with the environment or the air what we breathe in. So the sustainable products, which are green building certified products, we use them. Definitely, we'll be breathing much easier and much better, and we will last longer. So that will add another 10% to the life, rather than cutting down the cost of the construction.
True,
also.
True. That's very true. That's a good point. Would that be all? We've passed 4:24. Ma'am, is it possible to construct arches on the roof and window arches using Cob construction? Yes, it is possible to. With Cob, you need a little extra detail when you're thinking of Cob. You will have to add another lining of brick to be able to hold a frame or a window in place. You will have to revisit the idea of how constructionally you will look at window. But once you get that, it's really easy. And there are so many examples on the internet for you to find, especially videos. You can get there very quickly. But yes, the answer is yes, you can.
Ma'am, Anoushka wants to ask a question.
Thanks, yeah, hi, ma'am. Ma'am, my question is more over like about this social contract, basically, of why we being architects, we know that it will be easier to construct a building with materials that will be available locally, and because knowing that the maintenance too less, like we know it, like most of the architects around, like including us, we know that. But why aren't architects practicing that? Like why is there like a slim like something that disconnects them with this ideology and their practice? Like why aren't people more into sustainability or into practicing all these?
Well, I think maybe you didn't hear Ginny's question, because Ginny had exactly that question. His issue is that he doesn't have enough skill set, well-trained, skilled people to give you a quality output. At the end of the day, it all revolves or all ends up at commercial viability of something, right? And that is the sad truth, but it is the truth of the way commercial whatever works. So people who are not aware, right? Anything that is not popular, there is a fear about. There is a fear that, oh my God, I haven't seen this enough. Can I do this? Locally building materials to choose as a designer is very easy. But as a contractor, to start executing it is challenging, because you as a contractor are then working with people or laborers who are uneducated, have lost their relevance with the traditional techniques, and do not know how to approach it. Right? Do not know how to do it. They have a fear also to be able to execute and give you a good outcome. So then how do you go about that? And whenever there is a little necessity to reinvent something, to start, take a little extra, it takes a little extra, effort and courage to be able to get to innovating or bringing back old techniques, for that matter. I will not even say innovating so much. So not all architects are going to be open to it, and it is going to take a little time until it becomes popular. In fact, my seniors have worked much harder, and because they have put in the effort they have, is the reason that it is a little easier for me, and it will be therefore far more easier for your generation.
Okay. Or is it like, is there any monetary benefits, that unsaid monetary benefits, that the architects are intentionally not wanting to get into this mode of practice?
Not necessarily. I would not like to make a comment of that sort. No. I would not like to. People just don't know enough. And like I said, that the education system, the way that the media propagates it, the way the corporations have brainwashed you. I mean, even if it's not the architect wants to do it, but there is a client who is not open to it, because they have looked at things differently. I have my uncle has done this, why am I doing this? And that is always the conversation there. So it takes a lot of courage and a lot of ability from the architect's angle, from the client's angle, to have that kind of a courage to want to be a little different.
Exactly. Even though it is economically sustainable, it becomes really difficult to persuade the client into this.
For it to become economically sustainable in reality, it will have to be popular, because everything that is popular is economical. And this is not popular as yet. And the minute that it will become popular, it will become economically sustainable as well. So the attempt is right now to make this more popular. If there are more of us who can initiate practices which are alternative, it will automatically change the way even the market starts looking at sustainable options and possibilities. Vendors and laborers will automatically start opening up to wanting to do it. How many of them do oxide floors? It takes so long to convince somebody into it.
Yeah. In fact, they took more, like there was a project where we wanted to cancel, but then the oxide flooring, the total contract was like so much large, the amount was so much larger than, so we could just go in.
Yeah, the client would make a comment like, oh, I could have done a nice Italian floor. Why did you make me do this?
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would that be all? Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We've already had, some of you have already left because I suppose we've taken longer. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Karthik. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you, Jyotsna. Thank you very much. Thank you, Shivani. Thank you, Brunda.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.